I wasn't just losing my rights. They were taking them away piece by piece with legal documents and professional testimony. She didn't even hesitate when the judge asked if I was competent. 6 months ago, Rachel said, "Dad, maybe it's time we talked about guardianship. You're making decisions that worry us. We just want to protect you from yourself." And I stayed silent. And then I let them file the petition. And the worst part, I let them think I didn't understand what was happening. That's when I realized this wasn't help. It was a verdict. I trusted my daughter to have my best interests at heart. She said I was declining, making poor choices, becoming a danger to myself. I didn't realize she'd already made up her mind about who I was supposed to be. The certified letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in October, delivered by a postal worker who handed it to me with the careful neutrality of someone who knew what court documents meant. Superior Court of California. Petition for establishment of guardianship. The people versus my independence. I read the documents twice before the words sank in, each sentence hitting like a physical blow. My daughter Rachel, age 42, registered nurse, was petitioning the court to be appointed as my legal guardian on the grounds that I was no longer competent to make decisions regarding my health, safety, and finances. I could feel eyes on me from every direction. The mailman knew what it was. The neighbors saw the official envelope. In a town of 15,000 people, court documents don't stay secret long. Everyone would know within days that Rachel was trying to have her own father declared incompetent. In a small town, you're not just Rachel's dad anymore. You're the old man who can't be trusted. Some of you know exactly what this feels like. That moment when you realize your own child has been documenting your life, cataloging your mistakes, preparing to take away your right to choose your own path. When the person who's supposed to protect you becomes the person you need protection from. The petition listed specific incidents. On September 15th, respondent left the stove on for approximately 2 hours after cooking dinner, creating a potential fire hazard. A stove, a pill bottle, 1 scam call, 3 pieces of proof they plan to use. Each incident detailed with clinical precision, supported by Rachel's professional assessment as a healthcare worker. I was 78 years old, living alone since Patricia died 2 years ago. I'd been managing fine. Not perfectly, but fine. Apparently, fine wasn't good enough for Rachel. The letter requested my appearance at a competency hearing scheduled for December 3rd. 6 weeks away. 6 weeks to prepare for a legal proceeding that would determine whether I retained the basic rights of an adult human being. I'd built a successful accounting practice from nothing. I'd raised 2 children. I'd served on the city council for 12 years. I'd spent my whole life reading people who hide numbers. But according to this petition, I was no longer capable of deciding what was best for myself. That's when I stopped defending myself and started investigating her. The afternoon was quiet around me, coffee growing cold in my favorite mug, normal sounds of a normal life that was about to become anything but normal. I felt something shift inside my chest, something colder and more calculating. If Rachel wanted a competency hearing, I'd give her one, but she might not like the outcome. The house felt different after I read that letter, like every action I took was being evaluated for signs of decline. I didn't react. I remembered everything. Every conversation with Rachel over the past 6 months, every visit that had felt more like an evaluation than family time. "Dad, are you sure you should still be driving at night? Maybe we should look at some assisted living options, just to have information. The neighbors mentioned they haven't seen you much lately. Are you getting out enough?" She asked about my bank accounts more than my health. And every time she asked about my health, her eyes drifted back to my paperwork. Every concern had felt genuine at the time. Every suggestion had seemed to come from love. Now I understood they had been building blocks in a legal case. Rachel had made her choice. She decided I was incompetent before ever asking me how I felt about my own capabilities. But something about the timing nagged at me. Rachel had been divorced for 3 years now. Her nursing salary was good, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd built during her marriage. Her house in Hillcrest Estates required payments of nearly $4,000 a month. Tyler's private school tuition was another $18,000 annually. The payments, the school, the lifestyle, too expensive for a nurse's paycheck. If I were declared incompetent and she became my guardian, she'd have legal authority to make decisions about my property, my investments, my care. I researched guardianship law in California. Once appointed, a guardian had broad authority over every aspect of the ward's life. It was legal death while still breathing. This wasn't about safety. It was about control and money. 3 days later, Rachel called during her lunch break. "Dad, I hope you got my letter. The court's letter." "I got it. I want you to know this wasn't an easy decision, but we're worried about you. Some of the choices you've been making lately." That's what she wanted it to sound like. A daughter expressing legitimate concern about her aging father's welfare, planning ahead, being responsible. "Which choices concern you, Rachel?" "Well, the phone scam for one thing. Dad, you gave $500 to someone claiming to be Tyler in jail. Tyler was sitting right next to me when you got that call. I realized it was a scam afterward. I reported it to the police. But the fact that you fell for it in the first place suggests your judgment might be compromised." After we hung up, I called the police department and asked for a copy of the report I'd filed. The officer was sympathetic. "Happens more often than you'd think, sir. These scammers are getting sophisticated. Even sharp people fall for them sometimes." "Did my report indicate any signs of mental incompetence?" "No, sir. You were clear, coherent, and provided all the necessary information. But apparently, doing the right thing after making a mistake wasn't enough to prove competence. If you know, you know. The feeling when you realize someone has been reframing your normal human errors as evidence of decline. I understood now why Rachel had been documenting everything. She needed evidence to support her petition, but evidence could be interpreted different ways depending on who was presenting it. They didn't realize they were dealing with someone who'd spent 40 years understanding how evidence worked, and they didn't know I'd decided to fight back. They thought age made me soft. It made me precise. The signature on my bank accounts had never changed. My name, my money, my decisions. The next morning, I gathered data. I called my doctor and requested my medical records from the past 2 years. Clean cognitive assessments, no recommendations for supervised care. I called my bank and requested detailed statements, all bills paid on time, investment portfolio managed competently, no signs of financial mismanagement. The banker blinked at the request, then printed everything without another word. I called my lawyer, Margaret, whom I'd known for 25 years. "Frank, guardianship cases can be difficult to defend. The standard isn't whether you're perfect. It's whether you can make reasonable decisions about your welfare." What would strengthen my position? Independent, medical evaluation, cognitive testing, character witnesses, and evidence that the petitioner might have conflicts of interest. After we hung up, I researched Rachel's financial situation. Divorce records were public information. The settlement had left her with significant debt. If Rachel became my guardian, she'd have legal authority to pay herself fees for managing my affairs. She'd also have access to my assets for my care. My house was worth $800,000. My investments totaled nearly $2 million. She'd been positioning herself as the solution to a problem she was defining. I hired a private investigator to document my daily activities. For 2 weeks, she followed me with discreet surveillance, shopping, banking, driving, managing household tasks. Her report was detailed and favorable. Subject demonstrates consistent ability to navigate complex tasks independently, drives safely, manages financial transactions without confusion, maintains regular social connections. The investigator looked at me when she handed over the report. "Your daughter's going to have a hard time with this evidence." That single detail changed everything. Rachel's petition was based on selected incidents taken out of context, but sustained observation showed a pattern of competent, independent living. I wasn't declining. I was adapting to life without Patricia, making occasional mistakes, but functioning well overall. Rachel needed evidence of incompetence that didn't exist when viewed objectively over time. But there was no crisis, only a daughter who decided her father needed supervision, regardless of his actual capabilities. I didn't tell Rachel I was fighting the petition. I prepared silently. Quiet people prepare louder than they speak. I documented everything, organized my financial records, compiled character references from friends, neighbors, and professional associates. I arranged for comprehensive medical and psychological evaluations with specialists who had no prior relationship with Rachel. The neurologist looked at my cognitive test scores, then at Rachel's petition. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "Your daughter's assessment doesn't match these results." I researched alternative solutions, advanced directives, power of attorney arrangements, trust structures that could address legitimate concerns without removing my autonomy. I hired the best elder law attorney in the county. My attorney reviewed everything, then smiled for the first time since I'd walked into her office. "Now we can win this," she said. Over 6 weeks, I built a comprehensive defense, evidence of competence, character witnesses, expert testimony. I also arranged for independent evaluation of Rachel's motivations and financial situation. If this was going to be a legal proceeding, I wanted all the facts presented. 1 week before the hearing, I called Rachel. "I'd like to talk before we go to court," I said. "Of course, Dad. I hope you understand this is about protecting you." "I understand exactly what this is about." The day before the hearing, Rachel came to the house with care facility brochures. She looked nervous, more nervous than I'd seen her since her divorce proceedings. "Dad, I brought some paperwork about care options, places we could look at if the court decides you need supervision." She spread brochures across my table. Assisted living facilities, memory care units, places that cost between $4,000 and $8,000 per month, all requiring the liquidation of assets to afford long-term residence. "I've already talked to a few of these places," she said, not meeting my eyes. "They have availability. The waiting lists aren't as long as you'd think." I felt something cold settle in my chest. I watched my daughter plan my future without my input, calculating the sale of everything I'd built. She had no idea I'd spent 6 weeks preparing for tomorrow's hearing. No idea I'd built a case as strong as hers. She forgot what I do for a living. "Rachel," I said quietly, "before we talk about where I'll be living, I think there are some things you should know about tomorrow." "Like what?" I walked to my desk, pulled out a folder thick with documents, like the medical evaluations that confirm I'm fully competent, like the financial analysis showing I'm managing my affairs properly, like the character references from people who see me regularly. Her face went pale. "And like the investigation into your financial situation that shows exactly why you might benefit from controlling my assets." She sat down heavily on the sofa, her brochures forgotten. "Dad, I'm trying to help you." "Are you? Because it looks like you're trying to control me." I opened my folder and spread documents across the table next to her expensive brochures. Medical evaluations, cognitive assessments, financial analyses, character references, bank statements showing her mounting debt. "These are professional evaluations of my competence, Rachel. All recent, all objective, all concluding that I'm fully capable of managing my own affairs." She picked up one of the reports, scanned it quickly, her hands shaking. "I also have documentation of your financial situation, the debt from your divorce, the pressure you're under to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford, the benefits you'd gain from controlling my assets as guardian." "Dad, please. You forgot who raised you." She looked up at me with something that might have been recognition. "You forgot what I did for a living. 40 years of accounting, 40 years of reading people who hide numbers. Dad, it's not about money, isn't it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been building a case to gain control over $2 million in assets plus an $800,000 house. I would never. You already have. This entire petition is about gaining legal authority over my finances. Everything else is justification." I leaned back in my chair, watching her realize how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered her. "Here's what's going to happen tomorrow, Rachel. You're going to present your case based on 3 isolated incidents. I'm going to present mine based on comprehensive medical evaluations and financial competency. And the judge is going to decide whether normal human mistakes constitute evidence of incompetence that justifies removing my fundamental rights. What if you're wrong? Then you'll get legal control over my life and assets. But if I'm right, everyone in that courtroom will know exactly why you really filed this petition." "I'm scared, Dad." The admission hung in the air between us like a confession. "Of what? Of what happens to me if I can't make this work? The house payments, Tyler's school, the credit cards. I'm drowning financially and I don't know how to fix it." Finally, the truth stripped of medical justifications and legal language. "So you decided to drown me too? I thought you'd be safer with supervision, professional care, people around who could make sure you didn't make mistakes that could hurt you. Like the mistake of trusting my daughter to have my best interests at heart?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I convinced myself this was about your welfare. I actually believed it for a while. But you're right. Deep down, it's about money. It's always been about money. The guardianship would give you legal control over everything. My house, my assets, my life. Yes, While I lose the right to choose where I live, how my money is spent, or who makes decisions about my medical care, she nodded, tears streaming down her face. I told myself you'd be happier somewhere safe, somewhere with activities and medical supervision and people your own age. But the truth is, I need the money, and guardianship is the only legal way to access it. I'm going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Tyler's school, my entire life. I'm 42 years old and I'm going to have to start over with nothing. I watched my daughter cry and felt something complicated in my chest. Love and disappointment and anger and sadness all mixed together. Rachel, financial problems don't justify taking away someone's civil rights, even when that someone is your father. I know it's wrong. I know it's horrible. I just didn't know what else to do. You could have asked for help. You could have been honest about your situation instead of building a legal case based on distorted facts and manufactured evidence. Would you have helped? We'll never know now, will we? The hearing lasted 3 hours in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. Rachel presented her case first. Medical incidents, safety concerns, professional assessment that I needed supervision. She spoke clearly, professionally, like the trained healthcare worker she was. Her evidence was organized, her presentation polished. Then I presented mine. Dr. Martinez testified that my cognitive function was normal for my age, my driving record was clean, my financial management was competent and appropriate. My neighbor testified that I maintained my property well, participated in community activities, and showed no signs of confusion or dangerous behavior. The private investigator presented her surveillance report, documenting 2 weeks of independent, competent living. My attorney presented evidence that the incidents cited in the petition were isolated events taken out of context, not patterns of decline. Finally, my attorney laid out the conflict of interest, and the courtroom got very quiet. The judge deliberated for 20 minutes. The court finds that while the respondent may have experienced some challenges adjusting to life after his wife's death, the evidence does not support a finding of incompetence requiring guardianship. The petition is denied. I felt something release in my chest. Relief. Vindication. The knowledge that I'd successfully defended my right to remain myself. Rachel closed her folder without looking at me. Her hands were shaking as she gathered her papers. Her expensive brochures lay forgotten on the defense table. She left the courthouse without speaking to me, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown timer running out. 6 months later, she called. Dad, I want to apologize for everything. You were right about my motivations. I let desperation turn me into someone I don't recognize. How are you managing now? I sold the house, moved into something smaller but manageable. Tyler's in public school now, which is actually better. For him, I took a second job at a clinic. I'm paying down the debt slowly, but honestly. It wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. A year later, she visits regularly. As a daughter, not as someone evaluating my competence. She brings Tyler sometimes, who's thriving in his new school. Justice doesn't shout, it just waits. Some daughters take care of their aging fathers, others try to take control of them for financial gain. Some of us are older, but we're not blind. Time didn't take my competence. It revealed who could be trusted to respect it. She once told me I was too old to decide. Now she asks before she signs anything.